Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Podcast.
What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Formula One Podcast, your new favorite Formula One podcast, your favorite Formula One podcast, favorite podcast. We fit the bill for any Formula One podcast, basically, is what we're trying to say. But my name's Nick. I'm here with my guys, Rohit and Todd. We're about to get into all this crazy, I don't know, it's like silly season in 1 week of the year. All of a sudden, it's like so many things going on. But how you guys doing?
I want to say things, but then I'm worried by the time you, listener, hear this episode, it's already going to be hilariously out of date. Because to Nick's point, there is movement. And we're not just talking about the cars on the track.
Don't you feel like silly season started in January this year and it hasn't really stopped?
It's not even a season. It's just Formula One is inherently silly now because we make the joke all the time of the contracts aren't worth the paper that they're on, but this year in particular, that's been taken to a whole new level.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I don't even know where to start. I mean,
I have a place.
Let's do it. Go for it.
To me, and this is based on the amateur sleuthing that I do via X, via all our Formula One favorite blogs. The first domino has fallen, ladies and gentlemen, and that is Checo Perez with Red Bull, not only for 1 year, but the most shocking thing is 2 years. So Red Bull, as we know it today, is going to last through this era of Formula One. What do you want to call it? Like season? Like it is an era. So I'm just being inherently redundant. So what do you guys make of that, first of all?
Well, you called it earlier, right? The contracts aren't worth the paper that they're printed on. So they lock up Checo for 2 years to make his side of the garage feel good, his camp, whatever. And then if he hits the struggle bus again, like he did second half of last year, if he does that again, say he hits the summer break or goes the rest of the year and he's out in Q2 a lot, not finishing in the top 10, we're going to have a serious battle on at least the constructor side. I still think Max will win the drivers by a mile. But what like motivation would Red Bull have to keep Checo at that point for that extra year? Maybe going into next year, sure. But maybe they're just greasing the wheels, getting that second seat ready for Liam Lawson.
Even then,
someone else, right?
And I'll let Nick kind of finish the thought on this, but to me, it symbolizes two things. You're appeasing Max, because I think this is step one in keeping Max Verstappen at Red Bull, because he knows in his heart of hearts he doesn't have to do much and he's going to beat Checo. Secondly, this also tells me that there is no breakout candidate that Red Bull has to take that secondary seat, and that's more a damning indictment on their setup than it is anything else, because it's not Danny Rick. I thought maybe Yuki might have done it if he continued this trajectory, but even still, it's not even halfway through a season. Nick, what are you making of all this? Because I'm kind of flummoxed, because I do think that there are viable options. It's just how much is Red Bull willing to get out of their comfort zone? Because to also utilize the concept that we've talked about in a couple last episodes, Max won the Constructors by himself last year. I don't know if he can do it in back-to-back seasons, so I would think that they would need a shot in the arm. New blood, so to speak. And it doesn't seem to be the case for Red Bull's current plans.
I mean, I think I 100% agree on the Checo signing for 2 years being weird, right? Like, even if there's an out, and Red Bull can cancel the contract at any time, which it seems as if Formula One contracts are set up to where at least the team has the ability to just be like, no, this isn't working, which in a lot of ways does make sense. It does make it kind of a pain to be a fan of the sport, but 1 year, one more year makes sense to me. Max, I don't see Max leaving Red Bull, to be honest. It would take a lot, but
I think it would just be him leaving from boredom. Like he's just dominated and he's like, I'm going to go to World Endurance Car now or something like.
Which that would be amazing. Like Max at Le Mans is going to be amazing whenever he chooses to do it, because that just brings more eyes to that sport. And I know we're a Formula One podcast, but like I like sports car racing more than I like Formula One racing. Now that might change. There was a time that I liked Formula One better, but that might change. We'll get into that. This is a little teaser for further into the episode. But Todd sent something earlier today that was on Twitter that said something along the lines of Valtteri Bottas never missed top 10 qualifying as like not backup, as the second driver to Lewis. I think Rubens Barrichello and Schumacher were on there, and then Mark Webber was also in the 90 plus percentile. I don't know who he would have been with.
It was Red Bull.
Wouldn't he have been
a Red Bull?
No, it was Seb. Yeah, it was Seb.
He was teammates to Seb.
And so, interestingly enough, we were wondering if those stats were true when this text was sent to the group, and now that tweet seems to be deleted.
Fake
But
news.
it said something along the lines of Checo only makes it like 65% of the time to the top 10,
So
which just off the top of my head, like it could be totally off, but it feels pretty close, right? It feels like Checo is out every few qualifyings.
I feel that that's only been a recent development, and I would say in the last 18 months of driving season. Because prior to that, especially the first half of his first year, he felt right on par with Max, and they looked like geniuses because they picked him up from the scrap heap of Racing Point. And obviously he had the famous from 20th to first race, and that sealed the deal, so to speak, if we're led to believing the Drive to Survive episode. But yeah, I don't know what it is. It's more than a tailspin. Like, what else is there? And once again, to maybe tie into some of the other more desirable qualities of Checo Perez is he does have, I believe we had calculated, the 14th most richest man in the world's backing, and maybe that's the reason why they've kept him within arm's distance of Max, so to speak. But I still don't know. I can't make heads or tails of this, and that's saying something, because usually the three of us are quite the loquacious bunch. We'll always have something to say, no matter how minute the detail is with regards to our second favorite sport. But this is definitely something that's interesting.
I mean, I think that if you're Checo, there's no better seat than Red Bull.
We have an invader, Yuki Tsunoda.
There's no better seat than Red Bull, right? Like, if you're Checo, you're not going to go to Ferrari and be in a faster car, at least right now. You're not going to get into a McLaren seat at all anytime soon. Like, that team seems to be locked in for the next 3-4 plus years, right? And the only thing that would change that is if one of the drivers just totally shit the bed and just stop driving well, which it's just not going to happen. That leaves who? Like Mercedes? Like you even at, although Lewis did come out today and say that like he thinks that they're actually going to be closer to the podium with the upgrades they roll out for Canada. But like that's still like steps behind Red Bull and Checo in the Red Bull car. So the bigger question is, like, can your ego survive knowing that you're never going to be like the best on the track? Because Max isn't going to do anything.
Hi, Uncle Robbie.
Hey,
we'll cut it here. Sorry.
No, that's all good. I just don't think there's a better choice for him. And for Red Bull, I think Yuki could be a better choice if he's given the opportunity and continues to grow the way he has. But I don't think that there is agreement on both sides of that decision, right? I think Yuki is basically going to be in the sport with Honda. And if Honda moves or, starts to, provide power plants for, engines for whomever else, then like that opens up another opportunity. Like let's say something more silly season happens and all of a sudden 2026 Honda's going to be engine providers for multiple teams. Then Yuki could go to those teams and there's a connection there, like that. For some reason that seems to be the like really strong tie for him in the sport. And like he's not going to be good enough to push somebody out of a Red Bull seat at this point, no matter how good he gets in that cash wrap car,
Can I ask you guys? Oh, go ahead, Todd.
I was laughing at the cash wrap comment. I don't think Yuki will ever have a top Red Bull seat, no matter what he does, be it disagreements in the garage or his fiery nature or how he responds to pressure or whatever you want to call it. I think his talent level is is close to there, at least Checo, I think they'd be matching on pace, if anything, now, if you put him in the same car. But I don't think he'll ever get the go-ahead from the higher-ups at Red Bull to put him in that second seat.
Does it feel like him and Helmut have some sort of headbutting?
It does.
Right?
It does. And Helmut's been like publicly negative about him almost to his face several times. So, I mean, some of it deservedly so, because he like flies off the handle when he's like having a bad race or under a lot of pressure or whatever. He's like freaks out. I mean, all the drivers do kind of, but
I mean, depending on what country you're from, that's either presidential material or potentially pop artist of the century material, right? If you're just flying off the handle and saying random.
He could be the next JoJo Siwa. Yeah, you're right.
I would love to see him do the JoJo Siwa dance or wear the JoJo Siwa kiss makeup.
Yes, glitter. But you brought up Honda, and I seriously think this is a possibility for two seats there. Stroll will have been in the Formula One for like 10 years at that point, and maybe he just gets bored of being in the ether of Formula One, or Lawrence just is like, oh, I've turned this like $500 million team into a $1.5 billion team, so let's sell it. Or Fernando finally hangs up the boots, but Aston's going to be running Honda power engines. Excuse me. So I seriously think that could happen in the next couple years.
I'll give you a prediction right now. I don't know if it's a spicy take or a hot take, but before I make the prediction, I'll go back to something both of you guys have alluded to, and it's around Yuki's credibility within the Red Bull universe, if you will. I feel really bad for him because I think before he even set a foot in a car, he was kind of unofficially designated as their mascot, right? Anytime we talked about him, it was with like a cheery tone, like, I hate using this terminology because it leads to yet another bad short joke, but it was baby steps with Yuki. Like, anytime he did anything, it was just humorous. It was funny, similar to when you have a kid. Everything that the kid does is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And yeah, he threw his temper tantrums. We laughed about it. But now he's become a viable driver, and I just think he will never be able to escape that petulant, Cartman-esque figure that he's cut in Formula One, which is sad because I think on the merits of this year alone, he's probably been the second best Red Bull driver across their two cars, but he's never going to amount to anything. And this is where I'll use my prediction. We've had another seat recently open up in Alpine, and I have a feeling that if Pierre Gasly stays at Alpine, that second seat's going to go to Yuki because they're still very close. It makes a lot of sense to me. And it's also one of those things where that car can't get any worse, and we know whether you like it or not, Ocon's out, and that's probably another topic we can dive into in this particular episode. But that pairing makes more sense to me if we're just looking at it from a familiarity perspective. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm in agreement with Todd. I think the Honda thing is going to follow Yuki like I would say an 800-pound, what's a panda bear as opposed to a gorilla? But at the same
Pokemon, but
oh, there we go.
Maybe that's a bit too on the nose.
A Snorlax, maybe if that's the right Pokemon there. But at the same time, he's fascinating because if I had to make a prediction, I think he has to be the next domino to fall to accelerate even more of this game of musical chairs that we've alluded to this episode.
But when's his contract expire?
I think both Red Bull seats are open this year, much like Alpine are, or going into next year.
I don't think it was officially announced, but it was kind of rumored to be true that Danny Rick was confirmed to be staying for next year.
Okay, and like I said,
I don't know if that's official, but that's what I read kind of around the same time that Ratatouille got the boot from Alpine.
And we are only as good as the most recent infographic we see on Instagram. So listeners, let us know if we are hilariously past it in terms of if there have been other contract developments. But right now, to me, I would make the argument I don't think it's necessarily the best step for Yuki to follow Pierre Gasly because I think he's always kind of in his shadow. And that seems to be the narrative falling around Yuki Tsunoda, which is he's always in someone's shadow. And I'd like him to kind of strike out on his own and be the number one driver of a team. And I don't think that's going to happen unless it's Honda assisted or Honda backed. But even then, that's a tall mountain for a short man to climb. So we'll see.
Only way he becomes a number one driver is if the Aston Martin Honda thing works out and Stroll's his teammate.
Really? Because you don't see Lawrence Stroll saying, hey, Yuki, welcome to the team. My son's still the number one driver.
Do you think he told that to Fernando?
Fernando has 2 titles. What has Yuki won?
Nothing, but he hasn't had the chance to yet. But if he comes in and wipes the floor with Lance for a year, how is he not the number one driver?
But that, that brings home the point that at the start of a year, you're still saying Lawrence Stroll is the number one driver. And to your point, over the course of the year, when we actually see Yuki Tsunoda beat him in races consistently, then that second year, you're absolutely right. But going into that first year, as long as Papa Stroll is in the team, I think Baby Stroll is going to be the number one driver, at least for that first year.
Yeah, fair.
So I think, well, one, I have to say, I tagged you both in a fantastic photo on Threads.
Yes, you did.
In regards to Lance Stroll. I would have tagged our favorite Canadian, Iron Trev, but he apparently doesn't use Threads. But it was great nonetheless. So the one thing that I think is really interesting, Yuki is only 24. So his contract is up. Wait, what?
Describe the photo, Tad.
For full context, because I didn't see this until right now, so this is live reaction. But it's a picture of Lance Stroll sitting on what appears to be like a Formula 3 car, Formula 2 car maybe, from a long time ago, that is branded with Tim Hortons, and the car is in front of an actual Tim Hortons, and he's wearing a Tim Hortons race suit. But that's not necessarily what I laughed at, because the first comment is, does Tim Hortons taste like nepotism and incompetence? Which is such a perfect word. Oh,
I mean, I will say that I do enjoy some Tim Hortons. When I lived in Detroit, we had Tim Hortons every day, and it is delicious coffee. So
someday.
I can't speak to, nepotism and incompetence, but anyway.
You're my podcasting father, Nick Engvall. Yes, you can.
Yuki is only 24 years old. It feels like he's much older. Same with Lance. Lance is only 25. And yes, Todd and I 10 years ago would have laughed you out of the room if you told us that somebody that was 25 years old still had a good 4 or 5 years to go. But here we are, and Fernando Alonso is 936 going on 3,022, still in a seat.
I thought you were talking about all the points he's accumulated since he's been back.
So I think the only way that Yuki goes to Aston is if for some reason Honda goes back to providing engines to Aston like they did in the past, right?
Well, that's confirmed. That's happening.
It is happening. Okay, I didn't know that. So that's the switch. Is that 25 or 26?
26, I believe.
So Yuki has like a weird in-between year because he is not signed to Red Bull for 25 yet, according to what I could find. So I don't see Red Bull taking a chance on anybody else, but I don't really see him going someplace else. It kind of feels like another Checo situation where it's like, well, this is kind of as good as it gets for either of us at this point. Let's just stick with it one more year, right? Because if Honda's still providing engines for Red Bull next year, they're going to want that relationship to be good through the season until who's coming in?
Well,
they're producing their own power plants.
Ford, it's a badged Ford engine.
Which, at that point there's no reason for, they're not going to sign Logan Sargent to be like, yeah, America, fuck yeah. Right? So.
I wish.
They could sign Nicholas
Let's get crazy. Let's get crazy. Let's sign Logan Sargent.
I mean, I don't know that Logan Sargent has proven anything. Not that he's had a car to do anything with, but
no, he does. He's worse than
Nick DeVries.
Dare I say it? The DeVries. At least he won a Formula E championship and a Formula 2 championship. I would. This might be a hot take, but I would say Logan Sargent is worse than Latifi was.
Whew.
Can I interest you?
You need to record this and bring this one back.
Official historian of the podcast, Iron Trev.
Well, so again, I think it's really interesting that we have a lot of these young guys who don't necessarily have a confirmed seat or even, a confirmed direction in a sense. But I also don't see, with the exception of Logan Sargent, I don't think he's proven himself to be worthy of a seat in the one that he's in or otherwise. I mean, obviously it would be cool if they could have him as an American team or whatever to bring the sport more into the States, then I think that's how you bring in like actual American racing fans, as opposed to, hey, let's go to Miami for the Formula One Grand Prix, or hey, let's go to Vegas because there's racing there and we won't watch it. Fans. No offense if that's the type of fan you are. I mean, I'm that type of fan for many things in life. So
Yeah, but no, I mean, Formula One has very much proven that they want our money, but they don't want
us.
Yeah, they don't want us in Formula One.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're being honest, like, I don't blame anyone for thinking, do we really want Americans around right now? Like, they're kind of a mess.
Well, I mean, I get that perspective. We haven't been exactly the hottest bill at the ball for the last, like, I don't know, decade. But
I declare.
But you can't deny when you have a company like Alpine that replaces the entire organizational structure every other year and are underfunded by all accounts. We have teams like Haas that are like duct taping their car together every race.
Also
Or
American.
Williams. I mean, are they though? They're like Ferrari Jr. Somehow better at pit strategy.
I have better pit strategy putting on deodorant every morning. That's not anything to write home about.
That's
I go left, right, left.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point though, Williams is always going to get the pass because of their history, right? Like,
yeah,
they can enter the shittiest team, and we all those who have been a fan of Formula One have this hope that will never go away, that at some point they're going to get over it. Williams could become like the Chicago Cubs and not win for 100 and some odd years. And then even though they beat the Giants on the way through, and I happened to meet Eddie Vedder in an elevator that season, story for another episode. Like, that team is like, it's destiny type level of, like, experience for fans of the sport. So like, I don't think they're ever going to go away.
No.
No.
And funnily enough, also American owned. But
are they?
Yeah, whatever their
the hedge fund.
It's a
yeah.
Dorrington.
Yeah,
Dorrington. I think that's the name. Dorrington Capital.
That sounds more British.
It does, but it's apparently American money. My point was that. What the hell was my point? We've been tangenting all.
Tangentializing?
Yes. Yeah. I don't even remember at this point, but
Williams, American money. I'm trying to coax you into it.
No, we lost the plot. The point was, from the whole start of this thing, was the driver market, and I think the next thing that we're waiting on is, where does Sainz go? Because he, to me, is the deciding factor for all of these other drivers. So everybody that's out on a potentially, quote unquote, out of a seat for the rest, or for next year. Sainz is the next domino to fall.
So
does he go to Audi and go through several years of pain while they build up their infrastructure and their team, and they obviously have a lot of money to put behind the sport, etc., within cost cap restrictions, of course, but they get some sort of a grace period for spending on infrastructure while they come into Formula One. Or is it Williams, like Nick just said, and wants to bring back that legacy, and he'd have a great teammate in Alex Albon?
Can I ask a question before we start fantasy booking where Carlos Sainz ends up? Do you guys feel that he has been the biggest loser, so to speak, of this first phase of musical chairs? Because he lost his seat before any of these other things started to gain steam. And we all had him equally penciled in at Red Bull, possibly at Mercedes. Now, Red Bull's off the market, so to speak, because we just chatted about that in the first segment. But I read a lot of conjecture that is essentially saying that he dropped the ball in not only this upcoming season, but possibly his career. Because to your point, Todd, if Audi is the most viable place for him to go, I don't know if he should have the patience for the 3 to 4 years it takes to get them up and running.
I think that's the best he can do now, though.
Mercedes?
No, Mercedes, it sounds like, by all accounts, that Kimi Antonelli is pretty much a shoe-in for that next seat, or the other seat next year.
I I think we don't know what the nepotism tastes like, but there's a reason that he's going to go to Audi. I mean,
tastes a lot like Tim Hortons.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's.
Do
Why
they make
wouldn't he?
tapas? Does Tim Hortons have a tapas?
no, but that's the next collab. Tim Hortons
paella.
Audi,
It's maple
Audi
syrup.
powered paella. Yeah.
Yeah, it's maple syrup backed.
God, I
And
love
spicy.
paella. I haven't had dinner, so sorry. This is triggering for me right now.
Anyway, going back to Spanish nepotism as opposed to the Canadian nepotism we discussed earlier. So Sainz to Audi, Nick. What are you thinking about that?
I mean, his dad being so connected to Audi, driving for them, winning championships for them and other, racing events and stuff. It just doesn't make sense for him to go anywhere. Like, even if somebody comes along and is like, here's the best seat in the house. Let's say Max retires after this season and Red Bull is like, Carlos, it's time. Do you, like, of course you take that seat for one season, but you're going to go race with Audi and you're going to bring your dad into the fold. You're talking about like bucket list things. And I think we play up the nepotism aspect of this, but like, if any of us had the opportunity to do something that we were incredibly passionate about with our dads at the level that Formula One drivers get to do what they do, we would of course say yes. Like, if one of you guys were like a Formula One driver next week, I'd be like, you know what I am? I'm a fucking lug nut carrier. I don't care. Like, I just want to hang out with you guys and be a part of this, right? So like, those things happen, and I know it's a big deal in a lot of ways because it's like, yeah, it's kind of messed up that, Daddy Warbucks can pay for whatever and you can just bring your kid along for the ride. But like, that's happened. I mean, that's happened up and down the field, right? Like, Max is a child of, a Formula One racer. Like, with the exception of the few exceptions to those like wealthy families that have already been in racing, it's hard to get into the sport, which I think, is why when you see someone like Lewis, who is obviously not coming from the sport itself, it's a beautiful thing to see somebody make it as far as he did. And I think that's kind of all, like, it's like you're kind of like simultaneously rooting for both, right? You want, except for when the dad's racist, but like, you want the...
You say when the dad races or the dad's racist?
Racist.
Okay.
Racist.
With
yeah.
a hard T.
Hard T. Hard T. Yes. But like, you know what I mean? Like, you want to see the underdog story. You want to see the, like, didn't have the silver spoon and still made it and still was victorious. But you also are like, of course you want to see a father and a son, a father and a daughter, a mother and a son, a mother and a daughter, whatever. Like, let's be honest. We're going to root for that. Even if we like hate that person, we kind of I mean, Todd might be the exception to this because as much as he doesn't like Stroll, I realize that I'm probably speaking too much for him. But anyway,
I don't think you're speaking enough. Keep going.
I think that Sainz is 100% with Audi, 100% with his dad on that partnership, regardless of whatever he does at the end of this season, whether he gets into another seat and races next year, or if he just, spends his time racing simulators against Max after hours. Like,
But does he burn a bridge by not going to Audi now?
I don't think so. I think that's a reasonable, like, you sign a 1-year contract with somebody. Like, look, if you're Williams, if you're Haas, and you get a Carlos Sainz in your car next season, your team becomes better for the following season. If you're Audi, you have to understand that being in a car all the time, racing is much different than being in a car and testing and development. Like, you're hiring the guy because he has the mental
Acuity.
ability, to navigate the other drivers and the other, egos out there. Taking him away from that is definitely going to set him back, regardless of how much simulation you do, regardless of how much work you do behind the scenes, in my opinion.
But ultimately, that field of dreams scenario, as you've kind of constructed here with Papa Sainz and Baby Sainz, makes sense. And I do think, let's say Carlos goes through our hypothetical scenario. He does a year in Williams. That's a year that I think Williams can build upon, even if Carlos Sainz is not there, because there's just a certain professionalism and there's just a certain persistence that he drives with. We've always kind of talked about the fact that his superpower is he just puts his head down and drive. He's his own strategist at Ferrari. Thank you again for that, prancing horse. He knows the ins and outs of a car, and I do think if I had to make a prediction in terms of which one of these drivers would be best suited to be a principal in the future, I would say that my first overall pick in that hypothetical draft would be Carlos Sainz. So I do think he is an instant credibility to any team that goes after him, just because of the fact, to Nick's point, he knows the sport from the driver's seat perspective, from the pit lane perspective. He has a ego, but he also has a self-awareness that I don't necessarily see with the rest of the grid in terms of knowing when to turn the ego on and off, because he just has a smooth operator, cool, calm persona that I think only invites collaboration more than it does fear or paranoia or these other emotions we tie to our favorite Formula One driver.
Well said. I
Every
would
now and
pick
then.
Alex Albon.
In my best Bill Simmons voice, can we see him do it for a couple of years?
That's an interesting question, though. Who would you pick from the current grid to be the next team principal of X team?
I mean, I'm with you. I think Sainz or Papa Sainz, either way, right? Like, I think Lewis is not a. I don't think he's like a strong enough I don't know, like there's business
not alpha enough.
The alpha enough. Yeah. Lewis is like, he will be like one of the most important assets to any team he consults with for the future, right? Which is why Ferrari signed him. Like, if you get Lewis as he retires, you get Lewis probably for a really long time. You know, like I can't remember how long Niki Lauda was.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
They signed Lewis till 2035 to be an ambassador.
Yeah, I mean,
Ferrari
look, like you know that Ferrari is capable of building incredible cars, both on and off the course, on and off the track. You know that Lewis is going to give both their race team and their street cars another level of just ingenuity just by giving feedback. The same way that I think, you know, you could probably go back and look at the way Ferraris were developed around race car drivers from the very beginning. I just actually watched, side note, tangent, I just actually watched the Adam Driver Ferrari movie. I don't know if you guys watched that.
I saw it and I fell asleep in the theater, which unlocked the final level of daddom, is when you fall asleep too. But go on, what did you think of the movie?
I
was underwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, Cam and I were talking about this. It's a really difficult thing because as a racer, you want to see racing, and you have Patrick Dempsey in it. You have, you know, like a bunch of people that are into racing that wanted to make a racing movie, but then you're trying to also appease an audience that doesn't need to see racing to get the story. And the real story is Enzo Ferrari and his wife. And that didn't, they were trying to do both in a way that didn't work. So there wasn't continuity throughout the whole movie to think, oh, this is why I'm watching it. And then because of the way that it all plays out, you get to see the racing stuff because it is, you know, it's woven into their story, but it's like presented as if that's the story that you're watching the movie for, which it is, but that's not the reason that the movie was made in reality. And I think it's also even crazier because you can't call the movie, you know,
Ferrari. Wasn't it just Ferrari?
It was called Ferrari, right? But you can't call it anything else. You can't call it the Grand Prix or the Mille Miglia of 1957 or whatever, 56, whatever year it was, because there's not enough people that give a shit about one particular race. But that one particular race is a defining moment within Enzo's story arc. But I think like cutting it short on the end and not going beyond, you know, they go a little bit beyond. Obviously, you see the aftermath of that race, but like not going into the rest of it doesn't connect you. It's not Ferrari enough if they extend it, or if they extend it, that fits the name of the movie better than the actual like kind of surrounding the nature of surrounding or like making the race itself the kind of start and finish of the storyline. If that makes sense.
Well, Just wait for the sequel. Too Fast, Too Ferrari, and it'll be post 56.
Yeah.
No,
I thought the sequel was going to be Treviso Drift. Treviso, sorry.
you mean
Apologies.
Treviso?
Treviso.
Tifosi?
No, Treviso. Yeah, because I was going
Tifosi?
Tokyo. I was going Tokyo Drift and trying to figure out a town in Italy with T, and my mind went to Treviso. But then I was like,
Tifosi Drift.
Tifosi Drift sounds better, but that sounds a little more Anita Driver fanfiction-y to me. I will say this. I saw the movie. I was underwhelmed. I think to Nick's point, the movie didn't know what it wanted to be. Dare I say it was stuck in between gears. So there's my ham-fisted pun from an auto perspective. I almost think that you need to make two movies. You need to make a movie where it's just Adam Driver as Enzo Ferrari, and then you need to make a movie where it's Penelope Cruz as Mrs. Ferrari. Because ultimately, and this is going to sound sexist as I say it out loud, so if you want to cancel me, you can find me on Twitter at MadWatcher789. And say this, that the Mrs. Ferrari part was probably the most captivating part of the movie because I think she just blew everybody else away off the screen. But because the movie is centered around Enzo Ferrari, it just wasn't as captivating, even though he had the advantage of being the more quote-unquote interesting person in the relationship, which was the head of a Formula One team. You're also watching this man try to fight for the life of his company because I think at that point, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, there were American investors in the movie, and it's essentially a question of this man's Italianness, that should he sell his soul and, more importantly, his company to these American invaders, or should he keep it and essentially maintain the essence of Ferrari, which is 100% Italian?
Yeah, I agree. To steal the words from Ted Lasso, Penelope Cruz plays a boss-ass bitch in that movie, and she does an incredible job of it. And I think that she's actually the I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but she's actually the only one that had a reasonable accent. I felt like all the accents were all over the place in the movie.
So let's just do this. Let's just pivot away from the Formula One and let's just use the last 10, 20 minutes of this movie to rip Adam Driver to shreds because, no, I'm kidding. It's just weird because I think Adam Driver is a talented actor. He's far more talented at acting than almost anything I am in my aspect of my life, except for maybe trying to be a dad. But that being said, my dude, what were you going for in that movie? I can't tell. And I also think it's really jarring to have somebody who feels like he's a young 30-something, 40-something tops, playing a 65-year-old. And I am the world's biggest Michael Mann fan. Love Heat. I am now worried about Heat 2. If he's going to put Adam Driver in there, because let him be in Ferrari, let him kind of ruin a movie I had high hopes for, but I digress. So go ahead.
To be fair, Adam Driver, the age thing was the weirdest part about it. He's too young to be playing that old of a character. But to be fair to his kind of weird, it's not even weird. Like, I think if you watch the movie, you're like, it's just an accent, right? But it's also like the cadence and the like body language is, from all that I've ever seen and read about, very similar to Enzo Ferrari, which it's like you're playing kind of this weird, like, mafia don car builder. So like, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think even if you do it to a T perfectly, people are like, that guy's weird. That's kind of the nature
the weirdness is what we tap into anytime we sign up for something Adam Driver. Like, you're not watching that movie to be like, you know what, I'm ready to see this well-adjusted normal guy go through his day. It's not that with him. It never will be, dare I say.
True.
Anyway, where do you guys think he ends up? Do you think he's going to take the second Sauber seat, or where are we going with that?
I haven't seen the movie, so the entire time I just had Kylo Ren in my head screaming more. That was it. I haven't seen it.
Watch him twirl an imaginary mustache, and you get the gist of his
more. So the last 10 minutes, as you said, we should talk about what was announced today, which was the 2026 regulations. I will give you the cliff notes. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the things. They made the car drastically smaller. And by drastically, I'll give you some measurements real quick. Oh, it is 66 pounds lighter. It is 7.87 inches shorter and 3.93 inches narrower. So we still have a 14-foot long car and a almost 7-foot wide car racing around Monaco. Also notable, they're making the tires skinnier by a few millimeters, but the biggest change to me is they're doing active aerodynamics, and they are getting rid of our friend DRS. The drag reduction system is no more. It is being replaced by mode overtake. Wait, what the hell was it called? I saw a really funny meme about it earlier. But basically, instead of DRS, we're now going to have MOM.
Mom?
So, mom.
I can just imagine the Martin Brundles coming a mile away.
Yep. There's other things that were announced, like the engine regs, I think, are finalized, and there's going to be, instead of 80% of the power coming from a combustion engine, it's now going to be 50-50, so 50% battery. Essentially, what MOM is push to pass, like we are familiar with in IndyCar. They'll have a certain amount of push to pass, essentially. Still being within 1 second of the car ahead, I guess. It's going to work like that, but it'll be electric overtake instead of drag reduction. Also, they are reducing, which I thought was a pretty crazy stat. They're reducing the drag by 55% and reducing overall downforce by 35%, which means the cars will technically be faster in the straights and slower in the corners, so to speak.
Which feels backwards to me.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Initial reaction was like, wait, no, we really like Formula One cars because they can go 170 around a fast corner, not because they can go slowly.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? 2026 regs.
I mean,
Is it different?
but did he?
But did it change?
Yeah, that was.
I mean, at least it's smaller. As I've been saying since we started this podcast, like make the Formula One cars smaller. That's what we need to do for it to be entertaining again. We've essentially we do lose a little length, so let's
There's a dick joke in here, but like,
yeah, I don't
when you're like, the cars aren't that much smaller, it's only 3 inches, and then it's a bunch of guys in a room being like, "Hey, 3 inches is a lot."
I was in the pool.
Yeah,
It's cold.
It's basically like going from a Cadillac Coupe de Ville to a Chevy Bel Air in length. Like I don't know, like it's still a giant car.
I really don't think it's going to make that much a difference based on the sheer car size of it. And I mean, that's been probably the two of you's biggest bugaboo, especially with regards to certain races like Monaco, where it's like, just reduce the car. Please reduce the car. It'll make it more racy. It'll make it more exciting for all of us, as opposed to whatchamacallit, a promenade or a parade of drivers. I don't know why I said promenade, but it really am like a meh. It's another underwhelming development and something that we've been essentially promised would be the hopes and dreams of all of us as Formula One fans, and right now it just feels like a sobering glass of water across our face.
Yeah, I think that we've gotten to a point too with the current regulations where like we feel like there's competition, even though like I think a lot of people feel like Todd does, where like Max is going to run away with it. On F1.com recently, I think I forget who, but somebody wrote a story basically saying like Formula One is fun again. Three teams could be on the podium, and yes, there's truth to that, but like it's not like competitive up and down. Like it would have been nice if look, we're going to enjoy the sport regardless, but it would be nice if you had that midfield pack from last year, 2 years, where it's like 6 or 7 DRS cars in a DRS train. Like if all of those cars moved up to the front and could be close to the podium, that's exciting racing. I'm super biased around like the size of the car and like the frustration of a fan who wants to have the leadership / governing body / marketing people / whoever influences the decisions that are made like this. If you create a great product and there is a great race that happens, then you're going to make the most money from it. It doesn't really matter if you make the car smaller, like making the car smaller is not limiting the ability of the sport. But for some reason, it feels like the higher ups in both, like Formula One and other racing feel as if you're not getting bigger, you're not getting better type of thing. And, there's probably another dick joke about executives at big companies that we could make, but I'll leave that one. But I just want to say too, like the flip side of this conversation, I was kind of getting into it with somebody on the internet, which I don't usually do, but somebody talking about like the Detroit Grand Prix for Indy this last weekend or weekend before. They didn't race at Belle Isle. Belle Isle's a little island that like they've raced at for years. They've missed a few here and there, but like the island is kind of like a tourist summer destination spot for Detroit. And living there, I got to ride my bike out there, go to the races. Like it was amazing. I loved it. I lived right downtown in Detroit, by the way. So Belle Isle is like a very big experience for the family, right? Like, like you can go, like there's plenty of room to throw the football around. There's like places that people can go and be entertained. There's all these, like they have those big clear ball, bumper car ball things that you could get in if you wanted to. One of the years I was there, it's an entertainment thing for the entire family is what I'm trying to say. But the racing at Belle Isle is great because the road is just big enough, and the cars in Indy have gotten slightly bigger through the years, just like Formula One. This year they moved it to downtown Detroit and made it a street circuit, basically because Chevy is the sponsor. They own the big formerly Ford building in downtown Detroit. So there's all these photos of like Chevy's corporate headquarters right behind all of these cars. So no matter what car you're in, you've got a big Chevy logo behind you. It was a big win for Chevy. I'm sure they paid a ton of money to whomever plans this. And I think that Belle Isle running in the spring, summer like they do makes it problematic for just the people that live in Detroit that want to just go to Belle Isle to the park and enjoy the river and enjoy the the water and all that stuff. But if you made the racing in the streets wide enough for these cars, you'd have people excited about the race on the streets. I think we would all agree that we underestimated Las Vegas. We thought that it was going to be too narrow. We thought it was going to be boring. And it turned out to be one of the best races last year. I think we're probably looking at the same thing again this year because at least they made the track wide enough. I say all that to say, like, Monaco runs the same
configuration.
Configuration year after year. The cars are too big. So you've taken probably the most important, from a financial perspective, the most important spectacle, like, out of the racing, out of the question for good racing. And that's the most frustrating thing about it for me, is like, you can do both of these things. Like, these things do not have to operate separately. The people that decide where you're going to race and what the racetrack is going to look like can actually take some input from the fans, from the drivers, from like everybody who's watched the sport, and say, hey, let's maybe not do that. But yet it feels like Formula One is just continuing to go down this path of like, we don't really care. We know what's best. And
but I do think
if it doesn't work, we'll sell it to Netflix and they'll, we'll make it up on the back end.
I do find it insulting that, to your point, Nick, the FIA, and if that's the attitude that they have for not only new consumers of their sport, but the incumbent or the existing consumers that are going to be here long after the Netflix checks dry up, then it's insulting. Like, you guys are two of the smarter Formula One fans I know. You're also two of the only Formula One fans I know, so maybe I'm kidding. But at the same time, you guys don't mean to sound this, but you guys are broken records, but it's a good broken record in the sense that whatever you guys say, no matter how frequently you say it, it makes sense to me. It's just startling to hear that the governing body, who's supposed to have years and a lot more experience in terms of trying to overrule the sport, have done nothing, in my mind, to make it better, whether it be from an excitement perspective, environmental perspective, whatever the capacity for a sport to get better, the FIA continually chooses to ignore it, and that is frustrating. And I do wonder about the longevity of the sport for people that want to get into racing, but then they keep running into this brick wall of never changing rules and regulations.
Well, I mean, they're trying, right? They're just not doing it drastically enough. Like everybody, when they saw these, the new regulations, they're like, "Oh my god, it's going to be like 2008," even though the car is still like a foot wider and 2 feet longer
Yeah.
than it was in 2008, something like that, right? There's a lot. I get why they're doing the comparison, but the whole point is to again allow closer racing, less wake and drag, or like to improve the following car's ability to cut through any aero wake, whatever. So the jury's still out, but I agree with you, Ro. Like, it is disappointing in the fact that it's not drastic enough. They could be doing other things. They could cut a ton of weight out of this if they just went to like a sustainable fuel, like Sebastian Vettel's been on for years now, and then literally bring back V10s. I know that's a podcast, so shout out to those guys. But bring back V10s, run it on sustainable fuel, drop 300 pounds from the car with all the battery weight, and then they could make the car smaller as well, and we'd have glorious, glorious racing again.
And there'd be room for Andretti and whoever else wants to enter. You add a couple more teams to the mix and make the cars smaller. I think that's a more interesting way to like grow the sport than it is in the current state, in the current pace of like downsizing or whatever.
All right.
Yeah. You
Fair
think we'll lose a team? Last question. You think we'll lose a team before the next regulation change?
I don't know who we would lose. I mean, I saw the Alpine CEO came out and basically said we're not selling. I'd be stupid to sell the team. So why would I do that? So like, yeah.
I was just gonna say you're also stupid for playing your own internal musical chairs every year and starting from scratch. This is the one year that it's finally bitten them in the butt because they've been historically mid-table up until this year. But I guess because I'm the constant one-upper, let me ask you guys this. Obviously, we've got a race coming up. We want to hear, and rather our listeners want to hear the predictions we may have for that race. But give me one driver and where he's going to as well as our closing segment for this episode. And I can start.
Go for it.
Yeah. In a non-Max Verstappen universe, I'll go with Charles Leclerc, Lando, Carlos. And then for my driver prediction, I think we are going to see my best friend, my amigo, Esteban Ocon, as the replacement for Nico Hulkenberg and Haas.
That's something I hadn't really thought of.
Because we've got a Haas-shaped hole right now.
2, actually.
Yeah.
I think K-Mag's out
Again.
also. Yeah, but I think he's like kind of at peace with it this time. That's an interesting proposition I hadn't thought of. That is interesting. He has like the consistency and on occasion the speed.
But he also is a bit crashy, so he may be a candidate to fuck smash a door. Maybe a little bit more gentler, but...
Yeah. I'll go... I think we're going to also see... I will agree with you, Max does not win the race, but I think he'll get P2. I'll go Chuck, Max, Piastri.
And this will be Piastri's first podium, or has he gotten one? Remind me.
No, he's gotten a couple.
He's gotten one, okay.
And then my driver prediction, I will say Bottas to Williams.
Goes back.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I actually think Piastri is going to get a win.
Hey,
it's
speak it into existence, King.
But yeah, I think he's been like amazing the last couple of races. So and
the rest of the podium in your hypothetical?
I think it's probably Max and Charles. I think Lando's going to be right there too, but I think Max just somehow figures it out even when like the car is moving. The development of the car seems to be moving in the wrong direction for him. But and as far as I don't know, honestly, I think Bottas to Williams is actually interesting. That's probably pretty feasible.
It makes a lot of sense to me. He's really good at car feedback. He's a consistent driver, consistent pace-wise. He's not going to like blow the doors off anybody or come to the field. But what they're looking for is to build right now. And they already have speed in Alex Albon, so...
Yeah, it's either... I think it's either Bottas or or Sainz, right? Like,
I don't see Sainz going to Williams. I think the Audi deal is by far for all the reasons that you mentioned.
yeah. So you think he's just out off the grid next year?
No, well, because Sauber has a seat.
So who's gonna?
Wait, who's the other driver then?
Guan Yu Zhou.
You.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. Yeah.
I think Sainz to
Kick.
Sauber.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay, that makes sense. I just totally forgot about that connection. To be
That's
honest.
okay.
So,
A lot of us watching the season have forgotten about Zhou Guan Yu.
yeah, if Bottas leaves, especially, right? Like, plenty. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap. You can follow these guys. Dadshoe_JPEG. Rohit on Twitter. I'm Nick Engvall. It's been almost an hour. We appreciate y'all rocking with us. We'll catch you on the
I'm a
next
high
episode.
performance athlete.
See y'all.
I hate you. Hey, and we're back to Exhaust Notes, the after show.